Mr. Ken Bleakly.
Thank
Welcome.
you. City
Welcome.
Manager. Glad to be here, Mayor, council members. My name is Ken Bleakly. We have been working with Uptown over the last several months, working on putting together a tax allocation redevelopment plan for an area we're going to talk about tonight. And as you know, about a year ago, the voters here in the city approved the right to form tax allocation districts. And that process involves, once that approval's been done, that either the city or neighborhoods or areas interested in redevelopment plans put together a preliminary plan and bring that to you, submit that to the city for your review and determination of whether you want to set up that as a tax allocation district. Where we are in the process, just to give you an update, is we are in the process of actually preparing the redevelopment plan. We hope to have a draft plan submitted to the city within about 10 days. And what I'm going to do just briefly tonight is take you through what's the idea behind this plan and certainly answer any questions that you have. As you know, tax allocation districts are something the state has permitted since 1985, and the voters here in Columbus approved a year ago the consideration of tax allocation districts. And basically the concept's a pretty simple one, has a lot of little details, but it's a fairly simple idea. You establish an area, you freeze the tax base in that area. All the taxes collected for the county and schools continue to go to those jurisdictions, but any incremental value that's created, any new value, it goes into a special fund that can be used to reinvest back into those areas. And it only impacts ad valorem taxes. It doesn't affect personal property or ESPLOS funds during that period. TADs have been used in our state pretty actively since 1999. Probably the big example everybody always points to is on the left there, Atlantic Station. If you look at that upper picture, the decks that you see basically were funded by the tax allocation district for Atlantic Station, and when those decks were in place, about 11,000 spaces, that basically was the infrastructure needed to trigger the development above. And if any of you have been there, you know it's a very active development that has residential, retail components, and office component. On the upper right is another example of how TADs have been used. The old Fourth Ward Park in the city of Atlanta, which is next to the old, City Hall East, a major park facility, basically a water retention facility, was created along the Atlanta Beltline, and that was funded in part using tax allocation district funds. And it's become one of the major gathering places along the Beltline, as somebody has said, one of the crown jewels of the Beltline itself. And the World of Coca-Cola, which is downtown and adjacent to Centennial Park, also received some TAD funding support to create the new World of Coke a couple of years ago. So those are just some examples. Probably one that I always like to highlight is East Point. You can see in that picture in 2002, there's a property right near the Atlanta airport, right on 285 and Camp Creek Parkway, and the comment was no one had crossed that property since the Cherokees. Had been sitting there for years because it had a lot of rock and had a lot of soil conditions, didn't have any infrastructure. And the city entered into an agreement to create a tax allocation district in that area in 2002. And at that time, there was basically no development in that area. And since that time, there's been over 1.5 million square feet of retail, about 2,000 residential units, and about 4 million square feet of business park and industrial space created, all as a result of the TAD basically doing the site preparation work and putting a $48 million sewer line through the area, basically opening the area up to development. Once those infrastructure pieces were in place, then the economics of the project worked, and they had interest from Duke Realty and from North American Properties and several home builders, apartment developers in that area. If you look at values in that area, it was $4 million when the TAD was created, which is the blue line. And if that grew at 4% a year over the last 15 years, today would be worth about $7 million. That's about a 1.75 times growth. That would just be kind of the normal growth in the area. But with the TAD, the assessed value, which is that orange line, grew from $4 million to $89 million in that 12-year period. So today, values in that area are 22 times higher than they were when they started the TAD process. So I think it's a great example, kind of shows the power of how this incentive can work. Here in Columbus, the city's digest has been growing at about a 2% clip, a little less than 2% over the last 5 years. And so that is great because we certainly had the recession occurred during that period and had an impact on everybody's tax digest, but it's been kind of growing modestly during that period. What we're trying to do with this TAD is to accelerate that pace of growth. One of the questions we've had is, doesn't the area have to be blighted to qualify for a TAD? You know, if you're going to set one up. In reality, that's only one of 3 definitions that the state requires. One is that the area, if it is blighted or distressed, that clearly qualifies as a potential TAD area. But the other 2 are what are called deteriorating or underinvested areas, and the third is an area that lacks adequate infrastructure. So if you have an area of the city that has either of those 3 criteria, it can be eligible for a TAD. And I would say today the most common 2 that we see are deteriorating or underinvested areas and areas that lack adequate infrastructure to allow for development. Those have been the most common in the recent TADs. We're here to talk tonight about, I think, a really exciting proposal, which we're calling the River District area, which is to create a redevelopment plan that would include 3 TAD properties, and it would basically include on the south side the 6th Avenue and Liberty District zone, in the middle the Uptown area, and on the north side 2nd Avenue and City Village. All 3 of these TADs would be in one large redevelopment area, which has about 850 acres of property in those areas. Let's talk about each one. And within that redevelopment area, we'd have 3 separate TADs. The first one is the 6th Avenue and Liberty District, which you see here in blue. Basically runs from 18th Street on the north to the river on the south. Western boundary is 3rd Avenue and Veterans Parkway, and the eastern boundary is the railroad line and 10th Avenue. That area's got about 275 acres. About 20% of the land in there is tax exempt. It's owned by public entities. And it has a taxable value today of $26 million. It represents about 0.6% of the city's tax digest, and that's important. I'll explain as we go through this. The second TAD would be the Uptown TAD. It would be about 195 acres, the area you see outlined in orange on the map, basically from the river across to 3rd Avenue or Veterans Parkway, and then 8th and 6th Street on the south and 14th Street on the north. It has a current taxable value of about $48 million. It also has about 20% of all the properties are exempt because they're church properties or governmental entities that are in the area. And it represents about just a hair over 1% of the city's total tax digest. One of the things we've heard about Uptown is, well, Uptown's already got a lot of momentum. Is there really a need to have a TAD in the Uptown area? And I could show you just this map. This is kind of a very preliminary look at this point, but those areas in green we've already identified as underutilized or underdeveloped areas that are in Uptown. So there's about 25 acres of property in Uptown that looks to us could use the TAD. Doesn't mean they all would use it, but it certainly would be a vehicle to improve that area and sort of sustain the momentum that Uptown is starting to get. The third area would be the 2nd Avenue City Village area, which is basically the area north of Uptown along the river edge. And, whoop, we lost it there. You still got it there? Okay. And that area is, this would be the biggest of the 3 TADs. It's about 350 acres. There we go. 350 acres. It has a it has a taxable value of about $30 million. And it represents about 0.7% of the city's tax digest, a little less than 0.75% of the tax digest. Its northern boundary would be Manchester Expressway, the western boundary is the river, southern boundary is 14th Street, and eastern boundary is either 3rd Avenue or Veterans Parkway. So again, the goal is to combine all 3 of those areas into a TAD. Now, we talked about that percentage. If you add the 3 proposed TADs together, they represent 2.4% of the city's tax digest. So if I take those 3 TADs and collectively, the state law limits the city and county to having no more than 10% of your digest and all TADs collectively. So you would still have 7.6% left margin to do additional TADs in other locations around the city if you deemed that you want to do those. So relatively, given how big this area is, that's a pretty modest percentage. Around the state, there's only one city. Atlanta is the only city that's reached the 10% limit. Most of the cities are in the 5, 6, 7% range, but Atlanta is the only one, again, that has gone to the full 10%. When we look at the three TADs together, it's a pretty amazing plan that's been proposed. When you add the potential development in all three TADs together, it's just short of $500 million of potential projects that could be developing in those three areas over, say, the next 5 to 10 year period. Roughly, that's about 11-12% of your total tax digest you would be adding through the development that would occur in these areas. And we estimate that if that level of development occurs, it would generate about $60 million in TAD proceeds that you could use to reinvest in those areas. And of course, any of that reinvestment is subject to your approval as those projects come through and seek funding from the city at some future time. But a very significant level of potential development. How we came up with those estimates, we've been working with each of the groups in the three areas to try to identify what kinds of projects they have either in the development pipeline or in their master plans. And in the Liberty District, 6th Avenue area, there's a number of projects that are listed there. Collectively, it's about 500 units of residential, 15,000 feet of office, 70,000 feet of hotel, and about 150 hotel rooms. So we use those planned projects to estimate what the potential value could be. Now, we don't know the exact schedule when they happen or exactly when they occur, but again, those would be ones, kind of really hypothetical examples. In the Uptown area, we had a number of projects that were identified. One was Rivers Landing, the Raymond Road development, a new convention hotel, and actually several other hotel properties. Combined, almost 400 units of housing, 50,000 feet of office, about 100,000 feet of new retail, and about 600 hotel rooms. Collectively, that's about $170 million of investment, additional investment that would go on in the Uptown area, and that would throw off about $24 million of TAD potential. And then the newest plan is in the City Village area, working with the folks who've been doing the master plan in that area. They identified a number of projects that they're considering. One is phase 2 of the TSIS project, the redevelopment of City Mills, the Bradley Circle Village project, and Johnson Mill. Added together, those are about 500 residential units, a little over 600,000 feet of office, and about 85,000 feet of retail. Altogether, that would have an estimated value of about $190 million and would support about $20 million in TAD proceeds. So again, those are all part of that $500 million. So in summary, if the council's decision was to approve the three TADs for the River District, we estimate the potential induced investment that would occur would be just short of $500 million. That would add about $190 million of tax digest to the city and would support about $60 million in potential TAD funding if you decided to provide that funding. If you look at it from a private investment to TAD perspective, that means for every dollar of TAD that the city would commit, there would be $8 of private investment committed to the various projects over that time period. How would this process move forward? Again, as I mentioned, we're really on that third box there. We're in the process right now of putting together the redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan is sort of the business plan that would govern the district, and we'll be submitting that to the city for your consideration and review. And if the city, upon your review, decide to have a public hearing, you could then adopt that redevelopment plan. That would effectively create the River District TADs. And then at that point, we would begin our discussion with the school board and try to get them to concur to pledge their revenue as well to the plan. Once that's been accomplished, we then would establish the district, and that's done through the State Department of Revenue. Basically, they certify the tax base of the district. Also wanted to mention there's a second TAD area that we are looking at around Southeast Columbus and the Fort Benning area. We're not ready to bring that forward, but I would say you're getting a lot of interest and activity a year in about a year from the approval of this, which I would be very encouraged based on all the activity that we're seeing on the TAD front. With that, I'll open up to any questions or comments.
Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor and Council, I want to thank Mr. Bleakly for coming tonight to share with you what he has been working on with some community organizations and community people. We'd like to email you his PowerPoint. We don't have a copy tonight, but we'd like to email it to you, and then we would like to ask Mr. Bleakly and some of the community people he's been working with to make themselves available to answer questions that you may have over the next couple of weeks. We'd like to bring back to you on a first reading, which would be considered a public hearing, excuse me, in November, the second Tuesday in November, a first reading that would ask you to have a public hearing, hear from the community and others on these three redevelopment districts or tax allocation districts, and then a second reading, the first business meeting thereafter. But we'd like to email it to you and then let you send questions, ask that Mr. Bleakly and others make themselves available to meet with you one-on-one or however you'd like to meet to answer any questions. But we'd like to bring it back to you on first reading the second Tuesday in November. And so with that, he can answer any questions.
We have a couple, and also I think it would be good if Mr. Bleakly doesn't mind, if you could include a number where the counselors can reach him and an email address. Since this is our first time we'll be asked to do this, I think counselors should be able to contact you directly.
Great.
I know you've been involved in this for a long time, but I think sometimes you just want to have a personal conversation with somebody about some basic questions you have, and then of course there'll be plenty of public hearings where people can have a thorough vetting of all the issues, but I would bet there will be some detailed questions, as this is just our first time to really bat this around. So with that, we have Councilor Woodson.
Yes, City Manager, if it's possible, as a referral, I would like for us to go ahead and put this also on our website, so people listening in today from the public that feel it might affect them, be able to put in comments or send comments, have an email address where comments can be sent, a phone number that they can meet with Mr. Kent to discuss what concerns they might have. This way, if there are questions that we can't answer, the public has an option to contact Ken and let him explain it a little bit more detailed.
We'll certainly put it on the website, and then we can also capture his update tonight, pull it out of the council meeting video, and do a link that they could go and view this, and then, of course, send any questions to us.
And my reason for saying that is because in all three areas, there's development going on or wish lists and ideas of things that should happen. So some of those individuals that had input or had some thoughts or have property there can get a better understanding of what's going on. So at the first reading, they don't feel like they were left out of the process. To me, it's just outlining an area. It doesn't say what's going to happen there. It's just outlining an area that can be part of the TAD. It's not saying we're going to build this, that, and this, and that in that community. It's not saying that. It's just saying from this area to this area here, and this area to this area is the tax allocation. Just like we designed Midland. Midland said they're from here to here. Same way as Uptime from here to here, and then everything else involved in it.
Okay. All right,
Be glad to.
we have Councilor Thomas.
I want to start off by saying that when we first started talking about TADs, I was firmly in favor of doing this, and I still am. I am somewhat concerned at what is happening at this point, since this is the first, as the mayor said, this is the first time we've been talking about TADS as a council, and we have little or no information from anyone about what's going on here. I don't know who, if you look at your PowerPoint presentation, somebody, and I don't know who, determined the boundaries of the TADS. I don't know who did that. I don't know why that was done. I don't know how that was done. We've not had any conversation about that, nothing. I know that when we were looking at putting the TAD on the ballot and we voted on that, Mr. Bleakly was very helpful to us. I'm curious as to, quite frankly, who's paying your salary at this point? Is the city paying?
No,
your
we're
salary?
working for Uptown.
You're working for Uptown?
Yes, yes, we've been engaged by Uptown.
Okay. I do think that one of the things that Councilor Woodson said, I have a question about. She said that in what you have shown us, there's nothing that says this is what we're going to build.
Yes.
You said that one of these, I think it was the Uptown, and since I don't have a copy of your PowerPoint, I can't look back to figure it out, but one of the things in Uptown was 650 hotel rooms. Well, that's pretty specific as to what somebody's going to build or wants to build in Uptown. I'm just really, quite frankly, Mr. City Manager and Mayor, very disappointed that we have not had any information on this, and all of a sudden, in 2 weeks, you want us to vote on this. I'm real concerned about that. And I want to say again, I am in favor of TADS. I think they work. I think they do a good job. But quite frankly, when we were talking about TADS and what was going on the ballot, the Liberty District was a district that we talked about quite often, that would make a good TAD, and we need to take a look at that, and that was one of the areas. The Bibb City area was another one that when we were talking about it, that was one of the places that we were talking about. We never talked about Uptown, you know, and I'm not saying that Uptown is not eligible for a TAD and should not be considered for a TAD, but quite frankly, I have no idea where in Uptown you're talking about. You showed us a map with some green places on there, but I don't know where that is. I mean, if you had given me a copy of that map, I could figure out what you're talking about, but I can't do that tonight. And so I am very much opposed to our making haste in this very first TAD that we do. I want us to do this TAD correctly, and I want us to do this TAD to the best advantage of the city and of the private partnerships that are involved in the TAD. And I think by bringing this back to us in 2 weeks' time is not enough study time, particularly when we have nothing at this point. And I will end by saying I am in favor of TADS. I want you to, I don't want that to be lost in this conversation. I am in favor of TADS, and I think that they will work. I think they will be good for the city. I'm just not there yet.
Appreciate it.
Sure, let me respond first. I know Councilor Thomas said she was disappointed in the city manager and myself for springing this on council, and that's not really the way it works. What has happened is that the stakeholders have gotten together and hired Mr. Bleakly, which we appreciate them getting together on their own. I don't know, but certainly Richard Bishop can speak to the deal, but what little I know of it is that they got together with some other stakeholders they felt were in close proximity and had shared interests, and I think at one point talked about one big TAD district, And I think because of the distribution of resources, Uptown offered to pay the freight for the others, but they can speak to that. We were contacted as the city along the way. This process was going on, to my knowledge, with no real sense of urgency until such time as I think the stakeholders realized that if they're not approved by December 31, then they must wait until 2017. And that's a decision for council, certainly. But they see an opportunity to miss 12 months of potential projects, and that's something for city to weigh. So I'll let them speak for themselves, but when they came and asked to be on the agenda tonight for an update to council, what was conveyed to me was that they wanted to have this considered before December 31 because the law states that if the TAD boundaries, no projects, but if the town boundaries are not set by December 31, then you must wait till December 31 of the next year. And so I think that there's been some issue with the stakeholders wanting to have the boundaries approved, and they can speak for themselves. I'm not here to carry their water. Did you want to respond to that and then have Richard speak to it?
Yeah, and the mayor recapped it very well. Uptown sees an opportunity for growth, not just in Uptown, but how the Liberty District and the 6th Avenue corridor and what City Village can do to all of the area that we're talking about and what you saw today. And I certainly don't want anybody making a decision and not have enough time to review what you need to review. So I think we're very willing to sit down with each one of you and talk about the districts. As how the districts were drawn, we engaged Historic Columbus and Justin and all those folks that have been involved in City Village from the beginning. We included Councilor Woodson in the process with her district in that area that's the 6th Avenue, the Liberty District area. We had meetings that she was involved in. So it's just an ongoing process that we think is important, not just for Uptown, and we think Uptown absolutely needs to be a part of the TAD. There's still blighted areas in our definition of Uptown. You know, we talk about Uptown all the time. It's a journey, not a destination. There's always going to be things that need to be done in Uptown. And I think we've all seen some successes there, but it's just the beginning. We are not anywhere near where we need to be in Uptown. But not only that, we feel like joining these other two districts together just makes good sense. We believe that synergy there that will be created by those three districts is good for Uptown and it's good for the other two. And we are paying for it. We think it's that important to get this council to approve it in this process that we're willing to go through. And we think the review of it is very important, and that's why we're here today. But at the end of the day, even when these districts are approved, nothing gets finalized until this council approves it. You know, if it gets approved this year or next year, any project that comes forward, you have the final say on it. But there's opportunities there this next year. John Teeples is in the audience. John is working on a project right now that's right in the middle of Uptown that is critical to Uptown. And a TAD would be a great enhancement for his project. So these are just good projects, and we certainly understand that you want to do your due diligence. We want to do it right, just as you do. But we think we've got time between now and the end of the year to get it done, and we hope we can have your support as we move forward in this process. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, if I may say to the council, these redevelopment districts or TADs are not driven by staff. They're driven by organizations, they're driven by developers, those who have an interest in improving a particular area. And so staff is there to assist and help facilitate. These organizations came together and they put the money on the table to hire the professional to do the work that they've done, and we're simply there to facilitate, and we will be guided by the council, but it's not driven by staff. It's driven by organizations like Uptown and Liberty, and staff will support.
There actually was another, just so everyone knows, and I don't know what the presumption was, but there actually was another TAD that I would have presumed that would have been, quote, first, because right after the passage, the Fort Benning Tech Park began working immediately almost on a TAD. And my understanding is, though I'm not directly involved, that they're working with their city councilor of that particular district. And he's not here this evening to speak to it, but I believe they're meeting with him and chatting with him. And so I'm sure you'll be hearing about that soon. Why it didn't make it before this did, I can't speak to that, but I'm sure they could answer questions when they come. I get the feeling they're just working through the process. So in any event, we'll continue on with the discussion. Councilor Davis.
Well, and look, I agree with Councilor Thomas, and I think this is, Mr. City Manager, when you say it's driven by developers, that doesn't strike me too good. I'm a developer, and I'm looking for any advantage I can get too. The question here is what we're trying to accomplish, and I have to believe that, with all due respect to the parties here, that the administration knew about this. But what my concern is, we're all responsible for the welfare of the city of Columbus. And we've got a lot of projects moving right now. The mayor's got a proposal on the table. There's plenty of other tools that we've added to, redevelopment tools that we've added to our war chest lately that we can offer developers. But we've got a lot of things going on, and we've got a lot of counter activities as well going on, especially in the uptown area where a lot of land is coming off the tax rolls for various reasons, but at the same time, we're not replacing it. But we've invested a tremendous amount of money to get development and to start development in that area, and we do have a tremendous amount of momentum going in that area. I also, it kind of somewhat strikes me as an infill project when we really look at it from that standpoint. And then we all know from a standpoint of land, I mean, who we're dealing with. And one of the things I'm concerned about is we're biting off a pretty big chunk here in a short amount of time. And I think I was the first one that brought it up about City Village, which Bibb City would be a great place for a TAD. And that led to one thing, and the next thing, we got a master plan, and we're moving forward there. I also thought South Columbus would be great. I thought Midtown would be great in areas of Midtown, but we're biting off a big chunk here that we need to really, I think it's imperative that this council, your timeline, this is the first time I've heard about it. I haven't heard anything in the community about this just until today. Of course, I've been out of the country, but I mean, I haven't heard anything. The first thing that comes to my mind is I really got a grasp, and I look forward, Mayor, to talking to Mr. Bleakly. I'm having, as a developer, had a really hard time grasping your numbers. It's a pretty serious, grandiose plan, and a lot of it's speculation. I think you would agree with me. At the end of the day, what could it be this? Maybe, but I wouldn't bet money on it. That's a long, long ways away in what you were projecting, but I want to understand how it's going to affect the city and where we're at, because we're looking at it from a budgetary standpoint and being able to run the city. And if we're just giving away large areas that are already moving forward from a development standpoint, we may be shooting ourselves in the foot. So, I mean, I want to take the time to slow down and look at that and understand it. I think that's my responsibility, but at the same time, I agree we need to do whatever we can to keep moving development forward and helping folks. The other thing that I want to make sure of, and this is the other side, last time you were here, I asked you this question, you agree with me 100%. We did talk about, Mayor, originally with these TADs, we talked about that when we passed this, that the council was going to get together, go back and check the records. Our conversations were that we were going to get together and council was going to sit down and determine the areas of where we need to put TADs. Nothing was talked about that all of a sudden that private entities or public or developers would start being the ones that were pushing the cart in the name of stakeholders and bringing what they would want or what they would be what I would perceive as a wish list to start moving forward in such a short period of time. And I say this in just kind of loose conversation. But it goes back to trying to do what's in the best interest of the city. Not saying that any of this can't take place. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, and I'm 100% for TADS. I just want to make sure that we just don't jump so far into this that it comes back and has a counter effect. One of the things I'm concerned about, which we talked about last time and you agreed, was a counterbalance from the effect of cannibalism of the momentum that we already have down there. And I use that term cannibalism. You've got a lot of people that have invested a lot of money down there and are doing well right now, and you start affecting that counterbalance, you may start a new business, but you may put somebody out of business. And certainly that's something that I really want to understand. And we said that we would be giving more advantages to the new, but not the people who have already been down there, that have invested their hard-earned money, and they're already there today working, and they're trying to make it. But yet we're going to do something that's going to have a counterbalance and a counter effect, when, in fact, the development that you're talking about could come from the private sector, could come from publicly traded companies. Are we now going to start giving them development incentives that they really don't need it?
Well,
That's
you know,
my point. But what we're talking about with these three districts, when you compare that to what you talked about in Atlanta, that's a big chunk of development that even some of the things you talked about hasn't even happened in Atlanta, and they're way ahead of us. So
Yeah, it's always
get a hold
going to
of
be
that.
the scale of the community that you're working in. I mean, the development's going to be scaled to that opportunity. And the other thing is that you're only creating the district. You're not granting anybody any incentives. That's the second phase in the process. So you will have to approve each of those projects for incentives. And because you're in the district doesn't mean you qualify. You qualify, but it doesn't mean you receive any of that. They have to make applications.
And you're right, that's another thing. We're trying to move forward on this, and we don't even have any proposals to projects yet.
You really won't. Till the district's formed, that's when the
Well,
that's when they actually make proposals.
It's my understanding what took place in Atlanta is the projects were there, and then they put the TADs together, and then the projects were already there to.
In Atlantic Station, they did,
East-
but on the
East
west
Point.
and east side, they created the districts, then went out to proposal and asked for people to submit proposals on the west side and east side. So you kind of have them both, both models.
Well, I guess to my point is there was already an understanding that development wanted to take place there and happen, and it was ready to go.
Yeah, but
Whether it
not
was
on
the-
You
the
know,
east and west
not
side.
on the west side, it
Well,
really
there was some major
was.
developers.
No, not on
that
the west
were-
and east side. They did it to spur interest, to say, hey, this qualifies for special incentives in this market anomaly we have. We're going to create this district. Does anybody have proposals? So Atlantic Station was conceived as a concept, and then the TAD was developed to encourage the investment,
Well,
but the
Mayor,
others were not.
I completely understand how that all came about, and, you know, I'm working in the middle of a county Gwinnett County, that has a number of TADs, and some of them have not been successful, contradictory to what's been said. I've worked with that planning department many times, and I know what's going on. But I think in the point of my frustration, I'm just bringing up points that what I'm saying is I have a lot of concerns. I threw a lot of stuff out here on the table, and the reason, usually we have work sessions, we have opportunities to share this, but, I mean, I feel like I'm being forced tonight that, in 2 weeks? Is that what we said, 2 weeks, Mr. City Manager? That you want to start making decisions?
That's what the stakeholders have asked for, but that's not what you have to do. That's
Well,
what they've
I
asked
would
us to
think,
come.
Madam
They
Mayor,
asked
from-
us to be put on the agenda to address you and to bring you up to speed, and they asked if they could be put on the agenda for the next business meeting. And we're happy for council to make that decision one way or the other. But it's not, they called us and asked us
Well,
to be
what
on
I
the
would like to
agenda.
do is from our finance department, I'd like to see a complete financial impact study of what we're talking about here and how that's going to affect us and our finances as going forward. I think those are things that, whether you call it a stress test or whatever, I'll call it an impact study, but I'd like to understand it and then plug in these points that are being brought to us. So you're asking me to prove something on face value here soon, but Mayor, I ask you, I know that the administration has had to known about this.
Well,
But
let me,
has this- has
you
this
know,
been
I know this
explored?
is an odd thing because it seems like you're suggesting that we were hiding something
No,
from you. and
I'm
we're-
asking you if it's
I
been
know that was
explored.
also an assumption or suggestion that was made by Counselor Thomas. So I just think, let's just clear this up. We know, first of all, as you know, I ran on the platform of revitalization, and so I talk about it every day. I know about revitalization projects from stakeholders, not just developers. Now, the Fort Benning Tech Park was most certainly is developer-driven. But these others, I would say, are stakeholder-driven. So there's a definitional difference. But there's all sorts of potential projects, any one of which could hit as a TAD if they get their act together and are able to do a pro forma. In this instance, the leadership was available and they felt an urgency, which they will have to speak to. We know nothing of. But they came to us just very recently. I guess they were working with Counselor Woodson. Again, at the district counselor, which is always the appropriate thing we do when it comes to road projects or parks or anything else. It's the district counselor that we ask the stakeholders to contact and they work with. And we were asked if they could be heard ASAP. And we're certainly happy to accommodate them, but after all, as they've said and made very clearly, it's council that makes the decision as to the timing and it's the ultimate consideration. So, they're just asking for your consideration related to the districts itself. If that's not acceptable to council, then council will dictate their schedule.
Mayor, I understand what you're saying, but look, all I asked you, has it been explored? I don't, you're telling me because somebody came to us and they want to push this thing through that you're putting it on the table to be done. I don't look at that as being very responsible. But I know from the conversations we had in the past, you cannot say that we said we were going to take the time to explore this and understand it and get a grasp around it before we made the decisions. That's what we said. We said that this council would study and look at these things and there would be plenty of time. That's not what's happening here tonight.
Okay. Well, first of all,
The
we are not asking you to do anything. We are simply allowing stakeholders the opportunity to be heard by council. I'm not asking anything. I've not made a motion. I'm not authorized to make a motion. So this is a conversation among people who are bringing council information for their consideration. The proposal will be or will not be brought back at council's discretion. And I think there absolutely will be as much time as council wants to look at any aspect of any of the TADs. But I think there is a difference between simply setting a TAD district and approving the incentive and the projects, which are two completely different things. So,
I think we will have.
and we've got, every counselor's lit up, so we'll finish with Counselor
Well,
Davis and we need to move on then.
Our hope is to
Mayor,
have a draft plan to you in about 10 days.
Excuse me a minute. Look, Mayor, we honestly, this is not the process we go through. As city manager, we don't do it like this. We just don't do it like this. And that's not what, originally when I approved this process that we would start moving forward, that's not what I was led to believe. And I'm just saying tonight that I don't mind folks coming forward. I have the utmost respect for these people, Mr. Bleakly and what he's done, and Richard Bishop, what they've done. And like I said, I want to keep seeing momentum and development happen in our community. I also know the impacts that's going on right now economically in our community, the underlying currents, which concerns me. But I'm just saying, can we slow this thing down long enough to do an impact study to understand how it's going to affect us as a city overall in the future? We can't afford to keep losing revenue. We just can't. So if it's not the right thing, please, somebody correct me if I'm not doing my responsibility and standing up and saying, is this the appropriate process?
Okay. All right, Mr. Bleakly, you wanted to speak, and then we'll have Counselor Woodson speak.
Just to clarify, we do not have a complete plan together, proposed plan together. We hope to have that to you early in November. So at that point, and in the interim, we're glad to sit down and talk through the plan, but we'll have a lot of the facts and figures that we can sit down and walk you through those and answer any questions that you have or address any concerns. But we are literally in the process of pulling that together right now. So I think hopefully that will address a lot of the issues that you have. I think we'll have a lot of information in the plan. And the plan is a draft that we submit to you for your review and is subject to change and, anything you feel is appropriate.
Okay.
So it's just basically a starting point.
Right. Counselor Woodson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think in some sense, it got a little bit out of proportion of what should have occurred tonight. Tonight was supposed to be just a presentation of a concept. It wasn't. I don't know where the come back to vote in 2 weeks came from.
Just a request.
I know that part. Tonight was supposed to be, I was contacted a couple weeks ago in reference to this project here. And when the boundaries and things were discussed, I wanted to make sure that the Liberty District area was included in the process and that it was extended enough where more development can happen. My understanding of this whole process is this is just a idea that demonstrates the boundaries. Doesn't mean that we're going to go put dollars and cents right now. Doesn't mean that we're going to build a 600-room hotel or anything like that. Those are all concepts. When people have conversations, people bring up ideas of what could happen. Doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. And this conversation needs to get started, whether we agree with it or disagree with it. But the conversation needed to happen because everyone here has been discussing about development, jobs, moving our community into another avenue, another process. This is a good way. So actually tonight was supposed to be a process of just a briefing of some stakeholders who came together and said, okay, no one's moving on this, no one's doing anything. We are willing to start the process going. Here's a concept, here's an idea, here's where we want to go. So in the sense about the voting in 2 weeks, I don't know where that, came from. But the whole process of today was to brief everyone and, hey, this is a possibility. What do we think? Is this something we want to continue to study? Is this something that we could even consider to be a great idea? And I think it's been taken out of proportion, like this is stamped, sealed, and only developers know. This is a sketch. This is a draft of what can be done. And then the examples that are being used is no different than any other community. I was one who said, let's not use Atlanta right away because Atlanta is not a good place to compare ourselves with. Let's use East Point because it's a little better for us to grasp an idea. The whole idea of this is take an area that people are not willing to come and invest in, that's blighted, that has activities that people do not want in their neighborhood, and redevelop it. It's not saying, the request came from them. I wasn't prepared for that. The request came from them to do it in 2 weeks. We don't have to do what anybody asks us. We decide when and when it gets done. But we can take what was brought to us and be getting a tool to do exactly what you said, Glenn. If you got a concern, here's an opportunity. Yeah, there's a deadline, but if all the questions aren't answered and the public aren't all in integrity of it, then you have the right to say no when a vote comes on. That was my reason why I did a referral to the city manager and says, I want it on our website for that simple reason so that people that are hearing it today, and I said it that day, I said, I don't want anybody to think that this is a done deal, stamped and delivered. We want to be able to tell the community this is an idea, this is a potential, this can be a good thing. Let's talk about it. Is it what we want? The Liberty Theater area is the one that I'm really focusing on because we've been for so long saying we're going to do something, but we haven't been able to do it for one reason or another. This is a good opportunity for that. City Village, everybody got crazy and excited once that briefing came. That flew through this council chamber. very quickly to identify it. Uptown, everyone's been talking about development. I remember when I was the one against CSU really going downtown because it would have so many young people downtown and mixing with the bars and restaurants. And then later, I was convinced it would be a great way. Look at these other communities. So it's just a concept. Let's not lock ourselves to debate with one another. Let's look at it. And if everybody thinks it's a good idea, then we get a work session and we're gone. We'll let the public put input. We're not saying we have to vote on it. We're saying let's start the talk. Let's start the process. Just like before, you have questions, you have concerns, send them in, let those concerns be taken care of. We want to have public hearings so the people in the community can have the opportunity. Let's have it. Let's see what the public says. Again, and I'm going to be quiet, Mayor, because I know you'll be quick to push my button. Again, I'm just trying to say is this is a concept, an idea of what can be done. Now it's in motion to get worked on. May I get approved? Might not. Some might be taken out, some might not. I'd like to see the TAD on Victory Drive to include South Lumpkin Road. That's another one, But there's additional funds there probably for the future. We don't know. Before we beat it up and say it's bad and we got disrespected and we didn't get an opportunity to put an input, let's take it slowly. It's an opportunity to discuss. It's no different than, here's another good example. It's no different if Gary brought up an idea and he said, this is an idea I have. Then we start talking about idea. Are we going to beat his idea because he just brought an idea to the floor? No. It's a starting point for discussion. And I'm going to leave it at that. And if I'm the bad person for bringing a subject for discussion, then I'm the bad person. But we all sit here and say we want to better our community. We want to give opportunities. We want to create jobs. Well, then let's talk about it. Here's an opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bleakly, why did you all request 2 weeks from now? What's this time sensitivity? And I'm with Councilor Woodson on that. That did come from y'all, but just explain why, from your perspective as a stakeholder, as somebody who's been hired by the stakeholder, why is the 2 weeks the urgency? What's that all about?
As you mentioned earlier, the state law requires that you can create a tax allocation district anytime during the year. There's no set time frame, but it only goes into effect, whenever you create it, it only goes into effect on December 31 of the year that it's created. And the reason for that is simple. It's make it easier for the tax commissioner so that they get to the end of the year, they have their digest reconciled, and they use that December 31 value, so we don't have mid-year values and confusion about when the process starts. So theoretically, if you wanted to approve the TAD, we would need to get it done about the 20th of December to get the paper trail to the state, and then effectively would go into effect at the end of this year. And the only argument to do that is that if the TAD is created on December 31, say of 2015, you start building increment in next year. So January 1st, any additional revenues potentially go into the TAD district. If, let's say for the sake of argument, everybody wants more discussion, it takes till February to approve it, and that's fine. What that means is that the district would get formed on December 31 of next year, and so you lose the 12 months. And the only reason that's critical is if there's projects or things that could be happening in the 12-month period that you want to include in the TAD, then what's happened is that value already sort of goes into the base. But each year, whenever you approve a TAD, doesn't matter when you do it during the course of the year, it starts at December of that taxing year. It's just the way the law operates.
So it's not.
So at the point, I guess our reason we've raised this was if there was support for the 3 TADs and it was not a big issue, there's certainly plenty of time to do it by the end of the year. But if it's council's decision that you need more time to review it and consider the alternatives, then, take that time. It's not
Right,
a,
okay. So it's
you know,
not
again-
lethal to the proposal, it's just you thought you'd
Right.
take a shot at seeing if there was somehow consensus.
again,
and
if there was,
being able to
we,
move forward.
we did one in LaGrange in 24 hours. LaGrange got city, county, and school board approval in 24 hours to create a TAD. So they had a specific project, that was very focused on, that's totally unusual, that isn't what happens. But legally or procedurally, you can do that. So, our thought was, depending on what the approach of council was to this proposal, you could get it done by the end of the year if you wanted to.
Okay,
So that's an option, but if you don't want to do it, take more time to deliberate, it can happen next year.
all right. Counselor Barnes?
The way Mimi explained it, I can digest it without having indigestion. And I'm all for all three. I mean, I'm all for a TAD, have been for a TAD. Now, it's going to probably, I know it rained today. It will probably snow and be a blizzard tomorrow. The reason I say that is because I very rarely agree with anything Councilor Thomas says, but I will agree with her this time. My big thing, and the thing that hit a chord with me is what Mimi said. All of us up here, and by the way, I want to thank you, and I can't wait to go through the presentation. I do understand it. I'm all revved up. My adrenaline's flowing. The only problem is I have never been an advocate for us getting something and coming back in 2 weeks. You know why? Every last one of us up here are elected by the people to represent not what we think. It doesn't even factor into it. We're here to represent what the people feel. And 2 weeks is just not enough to get to the people, to get feedback from them. And I've mentioned this before. I am never one to jump into something because my main thing, I'm governed by what the people in my district tell me, not what Pop Barnes thinks. And so I did feel a shake and an earthquake when I heard Councilor Thomas talk, because I said, boy, I can't believe I'm agreeing with her. But I do agree with her. I don't think it's sufficient enough time for us to be able to take this information and explain it to our constituents so that we get some type of feedback from them. I mean, that's one thing. And although I'm all for it, I personally am for it. I personally would say, hey, let's jump on this here. But it's not affording me ample enough time to answer my constituents, for them to see it on the website, for them to understand it. And everyone sitting in this seat who's a counselor knows that we get myriad calls, questions, and we owe it to our constituents to be able to answer their questions and for them to understand things, to let them tell us, well, we're comfortable with this. Not saying that it would not be anyone, but I just have a problem with the time schedule, of this here. And excited about it, but I can digest it the way that Mimi said it, that we should do a knee-jerk reaction to this here, but allow adequate feed. And the second thing I want to bring up is someone comes to me in my district with an idea. I think that to expound on what Councilor Thomas was saying, I think that it's owed to every counselor up here, because it takes 6 of us to agree on anything, for us to be able to, once that counselor, come to the counselor, I appreciate the respect, but once that is, I think that the other council members, even though it might be my district, that the other council members, approximate to the time that I'm exposed to it, they need to be exposed to it as well, so that they can massage it and think about it and start letting the people in their districts know what the city's going to do. But I do want to thank you, because it was because of you that I had an understanding of TAD, but you gave such a spot-on presentation of the TAD last time that, it made me excited. I always wanted, it made me more excited to have one. I'm excited about all of these projects, very excited. But as Councilor Thomas and as Councilor Davis said, I think we need to put the brakes a little bit for the simple reason for us to massage it, but even more so, the constituents, the ones that put us in office, not to make decisions for them, but for them to get the information to them and them to tell us.
All right, thank you. Counselor Thomas?
I want to be sure that if I gave the impression that I thought that you were hiding things, which to me has a negative connotation, I did not mean you were hiding things. What I meant was, this is the first that we have seen all of this information, and I, for one, need an opportunity to digest it. I appreciate your willingness and the willingness of the other stakeholders to have individual conversations with us, but I also believe that some of the best conversations that we have are with each other. I do think that there are lots of times when one of my fellow counselors will bring up an idea in a discussion that I had not thought of, or will help to clarify something that is being said that if I were having a one-on-one conversation with you might not happen. So I am in favor of having these conversations so that we can get this information out. The 2 weeks, the city manager said that in 2 weeks we would have a first reading, and that would be also a public hearing. And then he said in 4 weeks from tonight, we would have the second reading and it would be a done deal. So that's where that timeline came in. And I'm hoping that with some of the conversation that you've heard tonight, that you hear there are at least some of us who are concerned about moving so quickly. And one of the requests that I would make of whoever it is appropriate to make this request is that whenever we discuss this to any degree, that we the counselors be given the information, the materials in sufficient time before that meeting so that we can digest it and we can talk to our constituents about it. And to me, that means more than after 5 o'clock on the Friday before the council meeting when I get my full agenda online. And I just have to say this, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to say it anyway. Please remember that I am an at-large counselor. That means I represent people in the entire county. And so anytime there is a conversation about what is going on in the county, it is certainly appropriate for the district counselor to be involved. But it is not beyond the pale that the at-large counselors should also be involved in those conversations. I know that there are times when people tend to forget that, but if you live in the city, in the boundaries of Muskogee County, I am one of your 3 representatives on this council. And I just, as I said, I probably shouldn't have said that, but there it is. And so hopefully when this comes back to us, whenever that is, we will have enough material and enough time to talk about it and do it correctly. It's the first one. We want to make sure we get it right, and we want to make sure that we're doing what needs to be done. And I think it will take more than 2 weeks or 4 weeks in order to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say maybe the frustrations that surfaced in some of my comments was more along the lines of just what we do from a process standpoint, not what's happening out in the community, and trying to grasp it from that standpoint. I'm just sitting here thinking about when I first heard about it. I was like, I would probably today say that City Village would be perfect, but the other part of me says, well, wait a minute, we're doing a master plan. I haven't even seen the master plan yet. So, I'm trying to understand if there was a project, I'm doing all this right here. Matter of fact, I'm having to do it right here. Because this is the first I heard about it. And I guess the frustration is that the way I heard it, I appreciate what Councilor Woodson said. Concept is appropriate. A concept is a matter of process, is a matter of discussion, is a matter of making sure we get it right, and we just don't just all of a sudden snap and do things, no matter who makes the recommendation. But unless we have a project, that is pushing it right away, that's one thing. But if we don't, I'm still trying to grasp around the matter of discussion and making sure that when this is approved or whatever's approved, that we know that we're doing the right thing. And I feel that responsibility to the citizens in the city of Columbus. Liberty District, we already have a master plan. I think those are areas that I could say today they need help. They need help. We need to spur development. And I've always thought that a TAD has been part of a redevelopment from a standpoint of blight, the but-for, or just trying to get areas that need some kind of incentive to move forward. But like I said before, we've spent a lot of money in investment to try to, in areas of town, to keep development going, and we've got momentum in those areas. And I'm still want to understand this from a counterbalance standpoint. I think the ideal thing would be to take a section, say City Mills, and start there and see how it works, and then maybe move to another area. We are biting off. I'm trying to understand this large chunk of potential area that we're just going to put out there and put in a TAD and just say, okay, anybody that comes along, you want to develop in here, just keep doing it. We're just going to basically infill. And I want to understand that impact of that access from that standpoint. But I also want to grasp it, like I said, Mayor, I still want to understand this from a number standpoint and how it deals with the city and our ability to generate tax revenue and what we need to keep this city running. I don't need to remind everybody about where the budget is and what we're dealing with revenue and the continued loss of revenue, not only in the sales tax, but in other areas. Those are areas that are charged to us to factor into this whole equation. That's not what you do, but it does from our perspective. So I really appreciate it. I'm going to call you, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to sit down with Richard. I know Richard well, and we're going to talk about this and try to understand it. And I hope you understand from our standpoint, and just feeling like all of a sudden that we're being, just pressed to make a decision. I'm not ready for that tonight, nor in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Councilor Woodson.
Yes, I just want to reply a little, I just want to make a comment on what Councilor Thomas said about being at large in 3 districts and knowing the information. I understand what you're saying. There has been many times where developers and people have met with the mayor, with yourself, Skip, the city manager, and talked about something in my district. And I wasn't involved in that conversation, but later brought up to date on that conversation and the benefits of it. I don't want anyone in this council to feel that anybody disrespected their authority or their power or their ideas or whatever you want to call it. The whole objective of tonight was to be a briefing. That's all it was. I think that requesting that the 2 weeks to be approved, it's what's caused all these conversations and mixed feelings about whether we should or shouldn't do it and the budget. So I hope everybody can put that aside and start looking at the actual discussions. Is it beneficial? Is this accurate? You said about such a big, large area. Well, that's no different than when we do cleaning of areas, hoping that a developer comes in. If it entices a developer, you have and Glenn, you know this about in being a developer, you try to find what would appeal to an individual? Somebody might come in this community and the Liberty Theater appeals to them, maybe City Village, maybe the Uptown. Well, if the TAD is in place, that gives an opportunity for a developer or a stakeholder to choose where, in an area that is beneficial to them, that it's being developed. So I hope tonight doesn't become, okay, forget it because I wasn't involved in the discussion. I hope it's just the beginning of a conversation to something that's going to benefit the whole community, not just the part of community. So I hope the continued discussion on this, we're not going to focus on, I wasn't part of the briefing. You brought it back for 2 weeks. So I hope we can get away from that. I hope we can just focus on the importance of what it could do for our community and bring it back for the discussion, put it on file. Call Ken, sit with Ken, one-on-one, get your answers. Again, he stood there before us. The mayor has said it, the city manager has said it. You know, Pops even mentioned it. We don't have to vote, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have to vote on it in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, in a month. We can vote on it when we all feel comfortable. So I hope we don't get bound down on that subject. I hope we can move on and look at the aspects of it and understand and go back to our constituents and say, all this is identifying an area that can be developed. And if it's in your neighborhood, guess what? If that happens, you're going to get rid of some of that blooded in your community. You're going to have jobs created for you. You're going to have a better place to live, a place that you will be proud to call your home, your community, your neighborhood. That's what I hope that we all focus on. Not who brought it, who didn't, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What is it for the community? And I'm going to leave it alone.
Thank you. All right, anything in closing that you
Well-
all would like to add? Or
Well, Madam Mayor, let me just thank you for the discussion and thank Mr. Bleakly and the stakeholders who brought all of this together. As I said, staff has been playing the role of facilitating. And I was in a meeting with them just on Friday. And in that meeting, we thought we could move this process by doing an update today. And I know that you wanted to bring it in 2 weeks, and that was the timeline that you had, and you were going to ask that we put it on first reading, and I said, no, we're going to do an update next Tuesday. We're not just going to put it on a first reading agenda, and I said, if their questions are answered at the update, then we can bring it back in 2 weeks if they're satisfied, and that's what we set out to accomplish today. But I think your plan, or you thought the process would be, bring it the second Tuesday in November, and then it goes from there. And I said, no, we're going to do an update. I just wanted to provide that clarification. Mm-hmm. And so the staff will continue to play the role of facilitating. We're not going out looking for TADs. You know, the TAD that the mayor talked about, that this other counselor is working on, is not being brought forward by us, as this was not brought forward by us. We will continue to work to support and facilitate developers or stakeholders who have an interest in developing or redeveloping economically depressed areas or areas that are slow to grow. And so I don't have a timeline or an agenda. They do. They do. Not me, not staff. I just want to make that clear. And so if council, and they wanted to try and accomplish this by the end of the year so that they could move forward, as Mr. Bleakly has stated. I don't have a timeline. And so if, based on what I've heard here tonight, it's up. I'm looking to them to communicate with you, because it's their idea, it's their proposal. We'll support, we'll gather information as like what you've asked for, Councilor Davis, but it's not our TAD, it's theirs. And so we're going to be in a support role, and and it sounds like we're going to go into next year, and it won't be available until December of 2016 and not December 2015. That's what it sounds like to me. I know that you wanted this to happen, and you wanted it to happen now, but do whatever you got to do to inform them, educate them, and bring them up to speed. We will be there to support in that effort, and if it's next year, it's next year. If it's 2017, it's 2017. But we're there to support.
Great, thank you. We have Mayor Pro Tem, and then Richard.
To say it won't be done by the end of this year, I don't think that's fair on anybody's part. We don't know what's going to happen next month and the next month. But council has said they want to have some work sessions. They want some information sessions to take place before a vote is brought to, before something is brought to us to vote on. And I think there's ample amount of time in the month of November to have these information sessions. And it can still come back in December and be voted on in December before the end of the year.
Well, and let me just say, I know that on the clerk's agenda, and of course, council has to approve that if you're interested in an amended agenda. What's on the clerk's agenda would be that we would meet the second Tuesday in November and the third Tuesday, because that fourth Tuesday gets into the Thanksgiving holiday. In December, we would meet the second Tuesday in December, and we would meet the third Tuesday in December, because that fourth Tuesday would get into the Christmas week. And then there would be no work session on the 29th of December.
Right, but
So-
we could have a first and a second reading in December, and if at the second reading, it seems that we're not going to get accomplished what we want to get accomplished, and somebody want to call for a meeting in December, we have a meeting, we might have 3 meetings in December.
Well, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, and just quickly closing, we will do whatever it takes to get you whatever you need, meet with you when you want to meet. So I don't know what the process needs to be for us to get the information out, but we're on board to do whatever we need to do.
Okay. All right, and we have Councilor Davis.
Well, and I was going to make that suggestion, Mr. City Manager. I think it's the city's TAD, to be honest with you. I don't think it's somebody else's TAD. I think it's the city's TAD. It's a redevelopment tool that the city is offering in an area that's being approved. Now, I was going to make a suggestion, Mr. Bleakly, and we like you, by the way, Mr. Bishop, too, and I appreciate y'all coming down, and just, we're doing a little tidiness of the workshop, I guess, but if we could maybe put a list of all these concerns and maybe somehow get all this stuff together and formulate it that you could put in a presentation, and then you can, communicate back with us and help us understand it. Because I'm serious. At the end of the day, I just feel that responsibility. At the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. Okay, and I don't want to do something that's going to harm another business that's already put their hard work and their hard effort and their money in something, and we're going to turn around and cause a counterbalance. I just want to understand that. So, Madam Mayor, this is just a suggestion.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Mr. Anderson, any final comments? Anybody? I saw you wanted to get up.
I got up several times, but.
We got to get to the microphone.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for letting us come to be a part of this tonight. And I did have some comments, but I'm going to withhold until we hear from what you guys have to say. And then we'll try to do whatever we need to do to encourage you to support this event. It is certainly driven. I've been talking to Mr. Bleakly long before any of the other facts, before the Uptown and Midtown. I've been talking to him about a TAD in the historic district. So in the Liberty District. So I'm not quite sure all of the political processes that you have to go through. And I understand you guys have to report to your constituency, but remember now, the constituency passed this. So they want you to do this, or they wouldn't have passed it. So think about it on that basis too as well. We want to make this city grow. I've been living here all my life, and I don't want us to stymie over some things that we don't feel like we have all the information to. I know we're going to get the information to you. And just keep an open mind, if you would, please. I ask you to keep an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for what you do. And we do have a very engaged council, and don't take that, I hope you don't take that as discouragement. I was at a conference once and somebody said, oh, well, in another community, we'll have our council rubber stamp it. And I literally spit my coffee out because that does not happen in Columbus, Georgia. So you've got a full and engaged council, as you just witnessed. So thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to the city attorney's agenda. Mr. Fay, what you got for us?
Okay, just one more point on the TED scheduling, just so y'all know whether you want to go more quickly or less quickly. If you want to do something this year, you've got to have 2 public hearings with this body, the governing body. They've both got to be advertised for at least 5 days before you have a hearing. So you got to have one to present a proposed plan and another for this council to approve a proposed plan. And you can approve it by resolution.
Do you mean district or plan? Because we've talked about.
A district.
Okay.
Yeah, a district plan. And it does not have to be an ordinance. You can approve it by resolution, but you've got to have those 2 public hearings, each with a 5-day advertised notice.
Okay.
So whether it's this year or next year.
All right, we've got Counselor Baker and then Counselor Allen. Counselor Baker.
This is going to regard his first item on his
Oh,
agenda.
okay. Oh, yeah, sure, we're
headed
just
that way,
about there.
which I hope
Counselor,
we are
we're
quickly.
headed
Yes.
that way. Counselor Allen.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, could the hearing, the 2 hearings be held in December?
They could be. You could have one advertised 5 days in advance and heard on December, let's see, what would that be, 8th, December 8th. Then you could run another ad and have your final vote on December 15th.
Well, that's what I like the
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem's idea, and I thought we could do it, do
Yes.
them both that way.
That is possible, and you only need to approve the final plan, district plan by resolution, according to the state law.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thank you. All right,
All
we've got Mr.
Well,
Fay with his agenda, and then
yeah,
we've got Mike Baker.
I'm going to run through these second readings, then we'll call the probate court resolution. Following up on the TED discussion, we've got the second reading. This is the mechanics to designate the council as the common redevelopment agency, and then the development authority is going to be involved also as an administrator.
All right, we've got a motion for approval from Counselor Allen, a second from the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there any discussion on this item?
That was my question.
Excuse me. All right, go ahead, Counselor Baker.
It mentions that we're delegating functions and duties to the Development Authority, but then it says to be determined later in the MOU. Is it possible to get some information on what that MOU is going to say?
It's generally going to say that they can perform whatever administrative duties need to be performed in carrying out any of these redevelopment plans, except for approval. That lies with the council.
So the MOUs will still have to be approved individually.
Right. The MOU will just be another enabling mechanism for the Development Authority to have a meeting, consider, look at a proposed plan, help the city administer it once it's approved, and issue bonds if necessary. They cannot approve the TAD district plan. That's only for the council.
Well, my other question goes to bonds, and I realize the answer, but I would like to see some specifics that lay out how those bonds are titled and issued, and how the city and us as the redevelopment agency are protected from liability. So if we could get, and I don't mean before you vote on this, I mean as somewhere as a sidebar, if we could get information at some point in layman's terms that specifically say, at some point, there are going to be bonds issued by one of these agencies, but it will not be us, and we will not have liability, nor will the taxpayers. If we could see the mechanics of how that works.
Okay, and did you want to comment on that, Ken, while you were here?
Yeah, the question was the TAD district will be a district of the city. You are the only group empowered to create a TAD district. So private developers, interest groups, citizens can come forward and propose a TAD district, but it's the action of the council that creates the district. So for example, if you adopted these would be the City of Columbus TAD District number 1, 2, and 3. In terms of the debt that you would issue, if you issue bonds, you basically have three things you can do. You can pay as you go, so you collect the money, you just pay it out annually. You may have a contract with somebody over 10 years, will effectively rebate your property taxes for 10 years. You can bank finance it, which is kind of more the way we're seeing deals done now. Just like a bank loan, the bank loan's with the city, and their only recourse is to the TAD account, to the money that's collected in that account. It's not an obligation, a general obligation of the city. And if you do a bond, it's a revenue bond. So it's tied solely to the money that's in that account. They don't have any recourse to, it's not a general obligation.
And I
of the
understand
city
that,
account.
and really what I would like is those bullet points from the city attorney.
Great.
With all due
That's fine.
respect, I would.
Oh, no,
So
absolutely.
we could understand not in a lot of legalese, if we could have it in some layman terms that,
Yeah, we'll get you something together. We can get you a memo on that.
thank you.
And I think, Mr. Blakely, you had left, and I didn't know if you would be helpful, but we've moved on from the discussion you were here for. However,
Oh.
we are here on a ordinance which will designate the Council of Columbus, Georgia as the Common Redevelopment Agency pursuant to OCGA 3644-4.
Oh, okay.
So you may want to stay for this vote, and then, I think, is it the next one? Or is there another one that involves?
This is the last one.
Okay, this is the only one that involves. So if you hold on a minute in case there's other questions. They're about to take a vote. Are there any other questions related to the first item on the city manager's agenda related to designating the Columbus Council as the Common Redevelopment Agency? Okay. Seeing none, we'll cue this to vote. Just a moment. All right, and you can record your vote electronically.
Okay.
I think that's it. Sir, thank you. We appreciate your input.